Get ready for the ultimate comic book extravaganza. Terrificon is back at Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut from July 28th to the 30th. Over 100 comic book creators, tons of celebrities, and hundreds of vendors all under one roof. Meet your favorite comic book writers and artists, mingle with celebrities from movies and TV, and explore a treasure trove of comics and collectibles. Terrificon, where dreams come true for comic book fans. Don't miss out July 28th to 30th at Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut. Get your tickets now at Terrificon.com. Terrificon, the ultimate comic book experience.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, and I am presenting a great Word Balloon Live that we did last week on video between Walter and Louise Simonson. I call them the 70s power couple for a reason. I can't tell you how many creators, when they first went to New York, probably crashed on Walt and Louise's couch before they found places to live. That's how great they are, and that's how beloved they've been, literally more than 50 years in the comic book business. They each had separate tracks of how they broke into comics. Walt was drawing 2- and 5-page features for a lot of DC's anthologies when he was breaking in. Louise started off at Warren in the creepy, eerie, etc. offices and found her way to becoming an editor. She tells that story, talks about working with Jim Warren. We talk about their big moments, from Thor to Power Pack to Louise writing Superman. So many interesting things, and even a couple projects that didn't happen. Walter has a great story about when he didn't even realize that he was being asked what he would have done writing Superman, and this was years before Louise was writing the feature. We talk about the creations of Power Pack and John Henry Irons, and so many other great things. Truly, I was so pleased to do this, and I'm happy to share it with you now. Walter and Louise Simonson on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex will be at San Diego Comic-Con in just a few weeks. His booth number is 2415. You can't miss the Alex Ross booth. Always this incredible gallery presentation of some of his most iconic covers and interiors, but also new stuff as well that you will likely see on your favorite comic covers in the months ahead. Make sure you check out AlexRossArt.com at San Diego Comic-Con, booth 2415. It's always very distinctly and gigantically located in the center of the action in San Diego on the main convention floor. Check it out or go online for AlexRossArt.com. Word Balloon is brought to you by my followers, the League of Word Balloon Listeners. That's the name I gave my followers through Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Listen, things are tough this year. I won't deny it for me financially. If you've ever considered supporting Word Balloon, I could really use your help. So if you think Word Balloon is worth the price of a comic book, even $1 a month would be greatly appreciated. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you very much for your patronage and your attention, the League of Word Balloon listeners. If you subscribe to Word Balloon, I will send you an email that will have a domino mask and cape and a nice League of Word Balloon listeners emblem that you've seen here on Word Balloon as well. But thank you for your support. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Walter Simonson, Louise Simonson.
There I am.
There we go.
Did you get it, Sugar?
Sorry about that, Louise. My fault.
Sometimes it takes a little while for the thing to show up.
That's all right. Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on earlier and talking to Dave Gibbons.
It was great to see. I just drifted by. There he was. And one of my favorite people. So I was delighted to be able to say hi.
Absolutely, man. This is great. We're really excited for you and Louise being part of Baltimore Comic-Con. That's coming up next weekend. And you're going to help us launch Friday. Honestly, Walter, this is going to be great. Dean Haspiel was your assistant back in 1985, and it was, and I want to get this right, it was you, Dennis Cowan, Howard Chaykin, and Bill Sienkiewicz.
I think he helped all of us. Probably, I think he was hired on originally, Dean could tell you better, as Howard's assistant. Okay. And there ended up being 2 studios side by side at, 239 West 29th Street, is that correct? I think that might be right. Anyway, we had a studio we started called Upstart Associates up on the 8th floor. Initially, it was me, Howard, Val Merrick, and Jim Starlin. And Val decided to move back to Ohio fairly early on. He was going to leave in New York, heading back. And when he left, Jim Sherman took his spot. We basically had 1,000 square feet in a big square room, and we divided it into quarters. So we had one guy in each quarter. And so when you came in the door, I was right in front. I came in late because I was working on Alien. So I couldn't go to the studio. So by the time I got there, all the other corners were taken. So I got the corner in front of the door. So I was in the front of the door. Jim was you came in to the right, Howard to the right back, and initially Starlin was on the left back. And then, there she is. And then Jim moved upstate after maybe about a year or so, might have a little more, but in a bit. And Frank Miller moved in. And then it was the four of us for several years.
Wow.
And eventually Frank moved out. And Gary Holgren, who was one of the underground cartoonists, and at that time, by then, was a really accomplished airbrush artist doing a lot of commercial work. And so he moved in, took over Frank's spot. Howard moved out to the West Coast. And then it was just the three of us for a time. And ultimately, I left as well, and Gary moved up to New England. So Upstart ceased to exist. But we were around, we started in 79 or thereabouts and ran until, I was in it until 86 or so.
Wow.
So 7 years.
Yeah.
We were there with kind of rotating membership slightly, but it was fun. It was a great place to work.
Was it
Right next door to us was initially a stained glass artist,
cool.
Benoit Gilsolo, which I thought was a great name. I think it was Belgian, and he did very beautiful stained glass for a lot of major clients. He was a major stained glass artist. His son was his agent, and when I don't know if he retired or simply moved to another shop. I'm not sure, but he left the space, and a graphic artist, took over. Don't remember his name. It's that Steve Hobecky guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get out of here, dude. So the graphic artist, I've forgotten his name. Howard might remember. And ultimately, he sublet some of his space, to Bill Sienkiewicz and Michael Davis and Dennis Cowan.
Wow.
I forgot if anyone else was there or not, but the three of them were there for sure. And so for a while, it was a batch of us in these two adjacent offices, lofts, really. And Dean kind of helped. Howard, I think, was hired on by Howard originally, and then kind of spread it around some to help out as he was needed.
Very cool. I was going to ask, is it very man-cavey? And Louise, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
It was just, big space, lots of books, lots of reference.
Oh, sure.
Pre-internet, no computers. But it was fun. It was a nice place to work. And at one time, Frank was working on Daredevil. Howard was doing American Flag, the first comic, and I was doing Thor. So a lot of good stuff was coming out of that studio for a while.
That's great. And Louise, we're really excited. Welcome, first of all. It's great to see you.
Hi, I'm glad I'm finally here.
I apologize. I thought I sent the link to both of you. I did it so early this morning, and I just, Ken.
It may have been on, way back in the emails, and I just didn't see it.
No problem.
While Weezy's talking for a second, I'm going to see if I can go over to I didn't think about doing this. I should go on my Facebook page and put a link up to this. Just
sure.
let people know we were doing.
And actually, it's did I send you a YouTube thing? Because it's
maybe in the email. I don't know.
Because the link is really just for us to broadcast, so we don't want a bunch of people coming in. Hey.
Oh well, that's probably. I can just tell people I'm on. We're on.
Tell Facebook. Tell your
I'll go do that,
sure.
and I'll be right back. I don't know. I'm on the other internet. I don't know if you'll be able to see me or not, but I'll be looking at my Safari.
All right, all right.
You should probably turn off your.
I'll turn her off.
Audio.
No, I got it.
Second. Anyway,
there we go. See, now he's backstage now. Now it's just you and I, which is great because honestly, Louise, and I told you on the phone. Honestly, I've wanted to have you on for so long, and I appreciate you coming on with Walter and Christy, and you are going to have a great conversation. I know at Baltimore Comic-Con Saturday.
Yeah,
that's going to be great.
I love Christy. She's the best.
So while I have you and Solo, honestly, I told you I read that great book about Jim Warren. And right now I'm forgetting who wrote it. The gentleman that passed away, great guy.
Skelly.
Bill
Skelly. Thank you.
Yes, Bill. Yes, is it Skelly? Okay, I had said
correct. Yes.
Man, I'll tell you, I got to talk to him when he wrote his Otto Binder book as well, and my God, what a loss! Because truly a tremendous comic fan and comic historian.
That's
but
right.
But it was great getting your perspective on working at Warren, and especially those are those creepy and eerie years. And I grew up reading that magazine, and I've loved hearing you tell your stories about working there and stuff. So yeah, tell everybody what it was like being at creepy and working for an impresario or an impresario wannabe like Jim Warren. Tell me about that whole experience.
Well, okay, I came in. It was my first comic book job, and I came into Warren. I applied for a job because one of my friends, Michelle Brand, worked there.
Okay.
And she said I was working in advertising promotion for a magazine publisher. And she said, well, there's this opening at my company. It pays better than your opening. And you could do the job because it does pay steps and mechanicals and stuff like that. I said, okay, sure. And I applied and I got the job, which was, very cool. I got a raise. Whoa, so it was 80s money, so it wasn't a whole lot of money, but I was enough to pay my rent anyway, so that's good. And so I worked I was hired in production, which is the people who do pay stubs and mechanicals and lettering corrections and all of that stuff. It turned out that my skills at pay stubs and mechanicals and all that stuff were, I think, less than they should have been. But it also turned out that I was pretty enthusiastic and thought I could do pretty much anything. So that when they said, well, gosh, we really need somebody who can do a letters page, I say, I can do that. We need somebody to write. I can write ad copy. I can do this. I can do that. So finally, they got me out of production. I'm sure there were plenty of people in production who were delighted by that. And put me over in editorial. They created an assistant editor position for me.
Wow.
In which I ended up, doing all of that stuff that I said I could do, which it turned out I could do, pay stubs and mechanicals and a little bit. And then, writing letters pages and writing ad copy and coordinating people's schedules. It turned out I was actually pretty good at that. So I guess I worked as an assistant editor for, gosh, it must have been 2 or 3 years. Walter, how long was I working as an assistant editor at Marvel? Right.
I'm back. Let's see, 74.
Oh, I never know how long I did anything.
You were there. You went to work for them in 74, and you were promoted, I think, to senior editor. I think in 76. I think you were the senior editor for 4 years there.
Okay, wow. There you go. Okay, it took me 2 years to get my megalomaniacal attitude about I want to run this thing. Bill Dubay, who was the editor, decided he wanted to quit. He didn't want to come into the office anymore. It was quite a long trip from Connecticut where he lived.
Okay. And
he decided he wanted to work out of his office, at home. He created a magazine called 1984.
Yes.
That he would do on his own.
Sure.
And Warren was looking around outside of the company for somebody to take over as editor. And I said, I went into his office and I said, I want to edit these books. And Warren tells me, he said, girls can't edit horror comics. Isn't that cute? Yeah, right. And I said, well, look, here's what I'm going to do. I will do it for 6 months. I'll get the books on schedule. I will work for my regular pay with no assistant. And he said, well, it's not stupid, right? I mean, that was really not, how could you refuse an offer like that?
Sure.
So it turned out that, yes, I could do all of that stuff. I didn't get the books on schedule. And, I was made the senior editor, and then I was made a vice president, which is sort of cool. But, I was a big, medium-sized fish in a really little fish bowl. But it was sweet of him anyway, I think
part of the deal with that for Louise was that she said she would do all this stuff, and she did it for 6 months. Then she wanted the title, and she wanted the salary.
Yeah, well, sure.
Which she got.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, and the garbage that you had to go through, telling will out, Louise, and it doesn't surprise me. And man, it was always great. And I'm sure when we had conventions, unfortunately, when Mark Evanier would have his panels and have a bunch of you on the same panel, and I remember good old Len Wein talking about you trying to wrangle him for a job over at Eerie or Creepy, and certainly the page rate there wasn't as good as it was at a DC or a Marvel.
No.
And Len had been established at that point. And yeah, I mean, you kind of had to sweeten the deal by like waiting till the last minute to tell them maybe who some of the collaborators you could possibly work with, and that usually helped sweeten the deal, as I understood it.
I don't know about that, but I did get some really good people, I have to say. Warren eventually hired Carmen Infantino, he had been the publisher at DC and had been let go. Yep. And Warren loved the idea of having the ex-publisher of DC working for him at his company. But it turned out that, and so he told me, we'll just give him as much work as he can do. And it turned out that Carmine could do a lot of work. So we had these, 8 and 10 page stories that I would get in, and, he would whip them out. And then I would have to try to make them, since it was an anthology book and the different stories were supposed to look different, I would have to convince different people with different styles to ink the different stories, to make them look like it wasn't just a Carmen Infantino book.
Sure.
And it turned out, luckily for me, there were a lot of people who admired Carmine and wanted to ink one of his stories. So I was able to get a lot of really good American artists to come in and ink one and sometimes even 2 issues short stories that I did. So it turned out really well. That was fun. I had a lot of leeway and was able to run experiments on my readers, which also was fun. I had been getting letters from several people. I get more than several probably, about, these stories are just, they're predictable, and we can always tell the end of the story by the second page. And I said, all right, here's the deal, people. And I was allowed to do this, right? I said, we're going to have a contest. And I will print, there'll be 6 or 7 stories in the issue, 8 pages, and I'm going to leave off the last page of each story. And the person who guesses the end of all of the stories wins. We had, out of all of our readers, we had 1 person who guessed the end of all this. I mean, I honestly thought that, within a week we would have 5 answers. And I said the first person, right? But we only had 1 person out of all the readership who guessed it. And, we gave them a prize, whatever the prize was. I don't even remember. And
let me jump in for a second. I will say that what Weezy also did, out of the 5 stories or whatever there were in the magazine, I think there were 2 in which the answers were really easy.
Oh yeah, I did 2. I did 2 easy ones. One really, really easy. One pretty easy. Medium up to difficulty, and the last one was the most difficult to figure out. And one person got all of them successfully, and that was the end of the letters that said we all always know how the stories are going to end, for a while at least. I got to do a series of sports issues.
Really?
Which I had this theory that that comic books and sports would have a lot of the same demographics. So if I did sports horror stories, well, then it would be a win, and that one actually didn't pan out. I think it actually dipped in sales for the sports issues. So obviously the horror comic readers weren't really sports fanatics. But yeah, I did a lot of stuff that was really fun. I had some really great people I was working with. Bill Mahaly he was working mostly putting together famous monsters of Filmland. And I had Ken McQuaid, who was my art director and had done some really nice, innovative stuff. He was really helpful in giving us excellent covers, and the sales did go up. The sales went up when theoretically when I became the editor, but I think it had a lot to do with Kim being such a good art director too. Probably more, actually.
Well, and playing with sports, that reminds me of the old DC title, that Strange Sports Stories that would pop up every now and then back in the day. I remember that, absolutely.
I wonder how those sold. Curious. Anyway.
Well, now that it also is celebrating its 1,000th issue along with action.
Back in those days, they probably sold better than most comics sell now.
Oh, you're right about that. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, you're right.
Really, guys, honestly, you've seen so many ups and downs of the business, and truly, and this has been kind of my general question of everybody, sadly, since COVID hit. Nobody knows what the direct market's really going to look like when we get out of the other side. And you guys went through the great experimental graphic novels that you guys did, also Star Slammers and the like in that period, that great 80s period of the black and whites, the boom and the bust of the 90s. And so here we are again in a big sea change moment. And any prognostication or any thoughts as the business continues to change?
I didn't have any thoughts back then. I don't have any thoughts about it now. I just kind of take my cards and play them as I get them.
I think this is an opportunity for small publishers. I think that there will be a lot more online comics sold,
yes,
over the internet. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now.
Yep.
The last royalty statement we got from, I think it was DC, had a giant list of material of ours that had been, put online for people to view online. So I think that makes that's going to make a big difference. I think people are more accustomed now to just getting online and doing all sorts of stuff. But I also think that since the big two, Marvel and DC, are pulling back a bit, I think that, comic book companies like, Boom and Ahoy and, oh gosh, there's so many of them, are going to expand. I know I just did a 5-issue miniseries that just turned into a graphic novel, Storm King, which is, another small publisher that, there are a lot of people who are willing to step in and take part of the market. And I think that's going to be interesting because a lot of the smaller publishers are doing things that are not superhero comics. They're doing, space opera and cowboys and, kids comics and fantasy and all sorts of, ordinary real life stories. It's going to be a very interesting and I think a more diverse marketplace.
That's awesome, and I agree with you. Both genres and, as you said, too, a look towards digital as well. So, this is great. We are getting questions for both of you. Oh. And a Facebook user says, Walt is the best. He invited me to lunch with him and Sean McKeever at Bob Evans years ago across from Colossal Con. Never forget his kindness. Oh, that's sweet.
I like Colossal Con. I was out in Cleveland. That was fun. It was mostly anime. I was there once or twice on my own, and once some years later with Louise, and it was mostly an anime convention. Fabulous cosplay. I think that was the first place when Louise was with me. We were kind of out in the hallway at the table. They weren't back in the main room. It was fine, but it was great because a young woman came by who was a fan of ours, who was also a big fan of anime. And so all these great costumes would go by us, walking by, and we would have no idea who they were. And she'd say, "Oh, this is so-and-so. This is this thing. This is that thing." And at one point, I didn't grab a photograph. I don't know if my camera had a phone. That was a long time ago. A group of young women went by, late teenagers, early 20s, I think. And I couldn't tell for sure. And they were all dressed up as the Avengers. So it was a completely distaff Avengers group, including four. I've forgotten the rest of them. And I hadn't seen much of that stuff. I mean, there are a lot of comics now about switching genders for a lot of characters.
Yeah.
But I hadn't seen much of that at the time, or maybe any of it. And I thought it was fantastic. They were great costumes. And there were a lot of really good costumes out there. So we had a nice time.
That's awesome.
It was fun. I'm glad he had lunch.
Now, Louise, you can confirm this question, and many of us know the answer, but we want to know the story about this. Is that you on the cover of House of Secrets '92? Did you pose for Bernie Wrightson?
I think from here on in, you should say no from here on in.
Yes, I posed for it. It was, back in the day, it was, Bernie was, he wasn't even yet a big deal. He was very talented, though. He and Jeff Jones and Mike Kaluta, I think, Alan Weiss might have been part of that group, who they had taken it into their heads to work from photographs, from reference for some, I don't know why, but they did. And, I happened to be a girl they knew. So they got me to pose for the House of Secrets story. I got to be on the cover. And then if you look inside of it, which I don't know if people ever do that, there's Bernie and me and Kaluta are all in there as characters. Like I'm the girl, and I think Michael is the villain.
Yeah, I think
Bernie's the hero, if I'm remembering right. So you can see a whole batch of pictures. I think Michael has had some of those photographs that were, or at least, I don't know if the actual ones that were drawn from or just, other discarded photos, but he has a batch of them from that particular photo session.
He's put a couple of them up on Facebook from time to time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
A lot of fun.
That's outstanding. So did you guys meet, like, Walt, were you pitching stories for Creepy and Eerie, or did you guys only meet when you got to Marvel? How did the two of you get together?
We got together through mutual friends. Archie Goodwin and his wife, Ann Murphy.
Oh, that's great.
When I came to New York in the beginning of August of 1972, and was lucky enough to get work pretty quickly. Short stories, little small things. And I ended up doing several jobs for Archie. I mean, when I say small, I mean small. I did a 3-page Alamo job. A friend of mine named Don Crar wrote. I did a couple of battle albums, which are like pin-up, 1-page deals. And a few other things, little science fiction-y stuff. A friend of mine, Jerry Boudreau, wrote. And then after about 6 months, I've been working for Archie mostly. He asked me if I wanted to draw a new backup feature he had in mind. He had taken over Detective Comics as the editor. And so it was going to be a Batman story in the front. And he wanted to run something in the back that was new. He wanted to run something that would be, if not antithetical to Batman, it would be sort of opposed to it on the spectrum. So you would have the two things in different ways. So where Batman was a city guy with Gotham City, this guy would be wandering around the world. Where Batman was a dark, brooding costume, gray and blue, this guy would be bright. Where Batman was largely an empty hand fighter, this guy would be a weapons master. And that was really the birth of Manhunter. That's where the strip Manhunter came from. Yeah. I think DC also wanted to keep the trademark, the name alive.
Sure.
Why Manhunter comes around every so often as a character, different versions. And I began doing that. That strip ran for about a year. It made my career because before I began, I was 6 months into my career when that strip started. So it was really early. And when I started, nobody really knew who I was. I mean, my friends did. I met Bernie, I met Howard Chaykin, I met Kaluta, Dan Green, Alan Weiss, a bunch of the young guys that were around at the time. So they knew who I was, but comic book readers didn't especially. And the editors didn't really. And the strip, it did very well professionally. It won some awards. It was noticed by the professional community. That's too long ago for me to have any idea. I mean, I've met plenty of fans of the strip since then. But, you only got snail mail and not that much of it. I wouldn't have seen much of it back then. So you didn't really have any idea how well or how poorly a strip was being received, mostly. And but it ran for a year. And by the time it was done, all the editors knew who I was. And I was being offered work in a variety of places. So my career really pivoted on that strip. And it was while I was doing that strip, since Archie was the writer, I was living out in Brooklyn. Archie, I would give pages to Archie. We were doing it by the third or fourth episode. We were doing it Marvel style, which means in the early episodes, Archie wrote a full script. Somewhere in the middle, we changed over to the Marvel style where he would give me the layouts or he would give me the script. I would do the layouts and pencils. I'd give them to him. He would write the script from the layouts or from the pencils. And then they'd be lettered and come back to me to do finishes on. And so he was taking pages home. And we were talking on the phone all the time. And so one night I called Archie to ask about something. And I got this fabulous young voice on the phone. And she can tell the rest of that story.
Okay, I had seen the pages that Archie brought home at some point, and I thought that whoever the artist was, he had done these really great hands. Like, hands are hard to draw, okay. And the artist had done these great hands. And I guess I asked who it was, and they told me it was a guy named Walter Simonson. I said, "Wow, okay." And then so Ann and I would trade babysitting back and forth. Ann and Archie, I think, had gone out, maybe it's their anniversary, and they'd gone out for dinner. And I was over their house, watching their kids. And this phone rings. And so I blah, 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 I answer the phone. Who is this? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, for Archie. And I said, oh my gosh, you're the guy who draws the great hands. that was funny. That's Walter and I remember that's how we met.
Wow.
I don't remember specifically meeting you in person. I just remember talking to you on the phone and, seeing you.
I can remember where I was standing in my apartment when we were talking on the phone.
And I remember where I was standing in Anna Archie's apartment.
Aw, seriously. That's what. Seriously, man, you guys are so adorable with this stuff. I love this.
I mean, Louise wasn't working in comics at the time. She was working in publishing for McCann and Bartell, but she wasn't in comic books. I didn't really meet her because of comics. And then we knew each other probably for about a year before we began dating. And I've kind of lost track of it. I used to know all this stuff. Now I don't remember for sure. I think we started dating right just after she began working at Warren.
That part is right.
Went to work for Warren in, I don't know, June or July of 74.
Was it right after Nixon resigned or something?
Well, we began dating on the day before or the day after he resigned. I now have forgotten. Like in August 9th or whatever that day was.
Wow.
Somewhere on that day before or day after was when our first date. So, but she was working at Warren by then and had been for, I think, a couple of months. But again, her working in comics had nothing to do with me. It was really that she knew other people in comics, and that's where the job offer came from. So it was kind of coincidental in a lot of ways that we ended up together and in the same business. It's been very useful because we get to work together, but it also means we both understand kind of what being a freelancer means and how, 7 days a week, you don't have any weekends. If the work is there, you just have to get it done.
Absolutely.
So you don't look forward to Saturday and Sunday and say, great, I'm going to kick back on Saturday and Sunday and just relax. It's like, oh my God, this job is due Monday morning. I'm going to be working all weekend, honey. And that's, it's very useful and very helpful to be able to share that experience where you both understand what the deal is being a freelancer.
Absolutely.
And it also, one of the things that it does is it's generally given us, parallel but separate careers. I mean, we intersect every once in a while, but we don't work together all the time, which in a way is good because if one of us gets, kicked off a book or something, it doesn't really affect the income of the other person, so that, it gives you a lot more flexibility to have two incomes, I guess, coming in, but not dependent on each other.
Well, it was very helpful in the 70s after we started dating. We dated in 74, and then kids, young children should leave the room right now. We began living together in 1976, and Louise was working at Warren. So back then, health insurance wasn't so astoundingly expensive as it is now. But it was still not cheap if you're on a freelancer income. And what happened was, I think Louise must have had insurance through Warren. So I did it. I think I did as well because of that. I don't remember exactly. But what did happen is I was under contract to Marvel for a number of years, and I was under contract to DC for a number of years. Louise worked at DC on Superman for about 9 years.
Yep.
And during that time, we were back and forth, but we had health insurance the whole time. It was either at the time, Marvel, what they offered you in a contract, it was like an exclusive contract. You got paid whatever your rate was. Some of it was before royalties. But they also, if you did X number of dollars worth of work 1 year, the following year, they would pay your health insurance. And then eventually health insurance became more expensive. Then they would pay half your health insurance. And these days, I suspect it's different than that too. But I don't really know what contract guys get these days. So, but it meant that for most of our career, up until about, let me see, June, July, August, September, 4 months before we hit Social Security age, we were covered by insurance. My contract ran out at DC with 4 months to go before I turned 65.
Wow. Yeah, it was either you under insurance or me under insurance. It seemed to be.
It went back and forth. And so we got COBRA, which is the same insurance we had, but for full price, which was pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But for 4 months, we could do it. And then at the end of 4 months, our birthdays hit. We were born the same month in the same year.
Oh, wow.
We turned 65. I'm 3 weeks older than Wheezy. So I hit 65 first. She hit it next. And after we hit it, we went into the Social Security office locally here in the county, and a very nice young woman, they're all young to us now, but a very nice young woman took these old people in hand and led us through all the computer stuff in like 10 minutes and got us squared away. And so, we're still working, so we're still making money. It's nice to have a little extra coming in every month.
You're here.
And what not being on company insurance means is that it gives us more flexibility as to what jobs we want to do as opposed to jobs we might have to do.
Sure.
Having said that, I will say that I don't know that I have ever had to do a job I didn't want to do for the money, just for the money.
That's great.
I think I've been incredibly lucky, really my entire career, doing jobs. I might not have put them as my first choice, but they were fun. They were kind of out of the blue. When I was working for DC in the old days, in the very early days, not under contract, this is really early. I did not have health insurance then, but I was young. It worked out okay by accident.
Sure.
I got offered Howard Chaykin was doing Sword of Sorcery, which was a Fafford and the Grey Mouser characters by Fritz Leiber. And it ran as a comic. Denny O'Neil wrote it. Howard drew the first 2 issues. He and I co-drew this 3rd issue. We each drew about half. Sal Amendola inked it. And in the 4th issue, I've forgotten who drew maybe Howard drew the lead story? I don't remember now. But Denny decided to put a backup story in that issue of Young Fafford, a story of Fafford as a young guy, and offered it to me. And I didn't have like a bucket list that said, wants to draw young Fafford over here. But I thought, yeah, sure, that sounds like fun, it was Fafford and the dragon and stuff. So I had things like that come my way that were fun to do. They weren't drudgery or anything like that. They were just enjoyable jobs, and a variety of them for a while before I began kind of settling down onto some regular gigs.
That's awesome, man. And Louise, I would imagine that you're kind of in the same position, because I'm always happy to read. And as you just said, you had that miniseries you just did, but I was, just kind of checking up and seeing stuff. Have they released Wonder Woman 84, or are they waiting for, obviously, the movie before they release it? Didn't you write a Wonder Woman 84 story?
I did. I wrote a Wonder Woman 84 story. I don't know if it's been released yet or not.
If it's the Wonder Woman book I'm thinking of, I'm not sure it is. But if it is, we got our comps.
We have copies.
Very recently. So we have copies of it. Sometimes your comps come out a little ahead of the publication date, but that's not always true. And I don't know what DC's policy is right now, so I don't know whether that means the book's actually out at the moment. But it is printed, and we do have copies.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're holding it back because they keep or they're kicking the movie. They're kicking the movie down the road, and maybe they'll want to put it out when the movie comes out.
Nobody tells us that stuff. We're just freelancers. We're at the bottom of the list, except maybe for writers who might be below us. Although these days maybe not.
I'm a writer. I'm a local writer.
These days writers are ahead of artists in comics.
Henry says it might have been Jim Starlin that drew that last issue.
Jim drew that. There was a Young Grey Mouser story. Thanks, Jim. There was a Young Grey Mouser story because what happened? I drew the lead story for the 5th issue. I penciled and inked the lead story for the 5th issue, and Jim did a backup story of the Grey Mouser, probably young. I don't know if that's because Spafford was young. I'm assuming it was that. It's the 4th issue. I can't remember for sure, and I'm guessing it's Howard, but I'm not sure of that.
Louise, they want to know the origins of creating Power Pack. Jesse wants to know, and obviously that's one of the great series that you brought to light. So yeah.
Well, I created Power Pack because Jim Shooter, who was my editor-in-chief, hired a batch of new editors, and I had my workload cut in half, and I got bored.
Okay.
So Shooter had been after us editors to work as freelancers also, but I was I mean, I can color sort of, but not great. And I certainly can't draw. So the only thing, and theoretically, I should be able to maybe is write. Except I didn't want to take work away from the people I knew who were writers, who were supporting their families. Their children were eating because they were writing stories. So I thought, well, all right, so now I'm bored and I want to do something, but I don't want to take work away from other people. So I thought, well, maybe if I make something up, then I'm creating something. I'm adding to the pot instead of taking away somebody's, piece of the pie or whatever to mix my metaphors. So I went to Jim and I said, well, I have this idea for little kids who are superheroes. And Shooter sort of looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And he said, well, write it up. Maybe we can get a miniseries out of it. And I said, okay. So I went back and I wrote a first plot and character descriptions. And, with powers and stuff like that. And a young artist named June Brigman came into my office.
And by the way, I will say, when I was loading this, so I did put the YouTube link up on my page so people can find it from my page. But I also found something that suggested that June is doing an interview even as we are talking. She is somewhere else, probably on Facebook, talking about other stuff.
Oh,
that's awesome.
We're going head to head right.
Anyway, so I really liked what she was doing, but I really didn't have any place for her. All of my books were filled with, people who were really good that I liked working with. So I said, well, I have this idea for little kids who are superheroes, and I don't have an artist. So can you draw kids? And she said, oh, yeah, I used to draw kids do sketches at Six Flags in Georgia.
Wow.
And sure, I could draw kids. So I said, okay, we'll take it home. Take home this, character descriptions and this stuff, and draw me the kids. And if I like what you've drawn, then I'll suggest us as a team. And she said, okay. And she came back with these wonderful little drawings. And I said, well, okay. I said, this is great. And I stapled everything together and I had it into Shooter. And a couple of days later, Shooter came back and he said, this is terrific. It is now a series. The first issue was a double-sized issue, and you have, I think, a couple of months to get it done. I had never actually written a full comic.
Wow.
June had never drawn a full comic. I think she may have drawn one somewhere. And suddenly we've got this giant comic that we had to get done. And I think it actually turned out really well. I mean, June was the perfect creator for this particular book. As far as creating Alex and Julie specifically, I mean, I did the powers. The powers are based on E equals MC squared. So there's an energy power, mass power, a speed of light power, and gravity. I just threw in gravity because, gravity's important.
Because gravity.
Yeah, why not?
Alex got the gravity power because he was the oldest child, and I thought of a more grave, adultish, trying to be an adultish demeanor than the others. Julie, I just liked her. I thought that she was very much into books and into fantasy, and I thought a rainbow flying power would be absolutely perfect for her. So that's what she got. She got the light speed power. Jack, as Mass Master, had a power that at first looked like it was not kind of a boring power. Like he could be really big like a cloud. And then he eventually found out he could go down really small. And it turned out Jack is actually, as the series is developed, is the one I had somebody pointed out to me recently that Jack is the one with he's the fighter. He's the one who's taken his power and done all this crazy stuff with it that, you'd think it was a nothing power that turned out to be pretty cool. And then Katie, of course, when she was 5 years old, and she's got the power to absorb energy and just disintegrate things and absorb the energy and then fire off these power balls. And hers is the most dangerous power.
The most destructive.
And she's it's in the hands of this little kid. So I guess that just seemed like a fun idea to me. That's great. How it came about. Did that answer everybody's question?
I think it did. I'll add one thing. One of the things is the luck of the draw. Having June walk into Louise's office at that moment was so fortuitous, partly because drawing children is different from drawing adults.
Mm-hmm.
Their proportions are different. They look different. And most of the artists in comics, not all of them, but many of the artists, I'll say many, I won't say most, but many of the artists in comics really couldn't draw children. They were drawing kind of tiny adults or kind of misshapen adults that were short or whatever they were. They were very strange. And including some artists who are quite good.
Sure.
And it was remarkable that June walked in on that day, and she'd drawn kids at Six Flags, and she could draw children, and she drew them very well. So the luck of the draw there is, we should have bought a lottery ticket on that day. It's what we should have done.
A lot of what happens is luck. I mean, you can feel like, oh, I'm so brilliant, but really, you just look around and it could have been, a different day, a different time. June could have gotten hired quick at somebody else's office and never come into my office at all.
Yep.
So, no, I was very lucky. And then I was lucky on other artists that I had doing the book too. Bryn Anderson, who did a lot of the, like our fill-in issues. June, it was doing a group book is really hard. And doing a group book when you're not even used to doing comics is hard. So that, she would not be able to keep up with the deadlines. And then we would deliberately put in a fill-in issue, which the fill-in issues always focused on one of our my editor was Carl Potts, and he had hobbies. So we would do Carl's hobbies for the fill-in issue. We did baseball, we did fish.
Yeah, Carl's an aquarium guy, so he's a big.
Yeah, he likes.
That's
fish.
Great.
So
that's fantastic.
I'm not sure if Carl eats fish or not. It might be like eating a friend. I'm just not sure.
And then I had John McDonough take over after June was done, and his work is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
he could also draw children.
I'm very lucky on the art in that book.
Yeah. No, it's well, and I agree with athletes who say, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, and I understand
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, and it's true. Yeah, again, you're right. June coming in, and the great thing is, truly, was I discovered, I think, Power Pack through Amazing Heroes, the magazine that would, kind of give everyone this was what's in comics right now. And it was just so great. And as you say, it looks so different because of June's art and because she could draw good-looking children and doing it right. And it really was this great kids book that was so unconventional. And yeah, you guys caught the wave at the right time, and I'm thrilled that it's still remembered fondly, and that they still will occasionally go back to it with a one shot or a special miniseries or something.
I'm doing a miniseries right now.
Oh, that's great. Are you able to tell us who your artist is, or it's okay if you can't?
June is drawing it.
June's back. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow.
I mean, it's kids or cats with June, I think is. she's
that's terrific.
We're doing Captain Ginger.
That's great. Talking to Dean about the discussion he's going to hold with you guys, Walt, and it does involve you as well, Louise. I didn't remember that there was a time that you might have taken over Superman. Is that correct?
Sort of.
Did you have a pitch in?
Before John took it over.
John Byrne, yeah.
And Andy Helfer took me out to lunch. Andy was editor at DC, probably the Superman editor right then. I wasn't paying a lot of attention. And we had lunch. And in the course of it, Superman came up. Now, I never thought in my memory of this lunch that Andy offered me the book. I could be wrong, but mostly if you're going to... DC at that time, DC had an approach where they wouldn't come right out and say it. They would kind of weave around it, and you didn't know. And I'm a guy. If you don't clock me over the head with a hammer, so to speak, I'm just not going to get it. You better say, "Would you want to do Superman?" If you screw around and dance around this whole thing, I'm just going to be oblivious. So we did have a discussion, which I said, well, if I was going to do Superman, if I got offered this much money, I wouldn't do it. And they weren't small figures. If I were offered this much money, I would think about it. And if I offered double my original amount, yeah, I would do it for sure. But in the middle, I'd think about it. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. And that's all we talked about. That's all I remember about talking about it. And a few days later, I was in the office, and Pat Bastien, it was Dick Giano's sort of assistant and helper. Pat went by her in the hall and said, "So I hear you turned down Superman." And I said, "Well, not that I know of, but maybe." So that was my brush with Superman. That was kind of how that worked out. And I was never offered it in a way where I understood I was being made an offer, and that may just because I'm such a hammerhead. So I just you got to be pretty blunt for me to figure out what's going on.
Well, then Louise, of course, you had that amazing run with everyone when all the Superman books were connected, and I love the fact that you created John Henry Irons, who became Steel. Mm-hmm. And you and John Bogdanove, of course, if I'm saying it properly, I hope I am.
It's been said every way you can imagine.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, sometimes it's an eye chart when you try to get somebody's. And I speaking as someone with a weird last name as well, I can appreciate that absolutely. But I'll tell you, I love that run. And I've gotten Jerry Ordway's perspective on the death of Superman and Dan Jurgens' perspective. So, could you tell me your Death of Superman story? What do you remember about that session when this decision was made and these great characters were created from this decision?
Yeah. Okay. We had a meeting. Every year we did a Superman meeting, which I know you've heard about in everybody's rendition. And we had gone into the meeting thinking that we were going to do the wedding of Lois and Clark. We had worked out a continuity that over a year in which this would happen. And it was shown to Jeanette, who's the publisher at the time.
Jeanette
said, "Oh, well, you can't do that because we have a TV show coming. And Lois and Clark won't be married on the TV show. So this will be confusing to our readers to have them married in one place and not married in another place. So therefore, never mind." And we said, "Oh my God." So we spent ages, working, several days at least, working on this huge years-long continuity.
Sure.
So we're sitting there in the and kind of looking at each other, dumbfounded after Jeanette leaves. And Jerry, who often said, "Let's kill him," said, what do we do next? Let's just kill him. And this time we said, Jerry, let's kill him. So that was kind of where that came from. It was Jerry's idea that we took seriously at the right time, place at the right time. It was very, again, luck and being repaired, whatever. So then the question came up, well, okay, we're going to kill him. How's he going to die? So who's going to kill Superman? And we decided that we didn't want any of the people who he'd faced a million times before. Luthor couldn't do it. Brainiac, whatever. He's like, we needed somebody totally new out of the blue. I had wanted it to be somebody who came in with no backstory at all, who was just this giant monster, this juggernaut that would just physically overpower Superman. And I'm sure other people had their own thoughts about that too. And so that was decided on. And then it was like, well, what does this guy look like? So then the artist had a contest in which they had 15 minutes, I think, probably about maybe 5, to sit down and do their sketch of what they thought the character would look like. I don't know where the name Doomsday came from.
Okay.
I don't know if he had a name at that point or not. But everybody did their sketches, and it turned out that everybody liked Dan's sketch the best. So Dan Jurgens' design for Doomsday became Doomsday. And then, we worked out a story. It was, one of the things that we wanted to do, and this may have been Carlin's idea. These meetings were so freeform.
Sure.
And they had so many people involved. It wasn't just the writers and the pencilers. There were the inkers and the colorists and even the letterers. were
That's
all
great.
And of course, the editors and assistant editors. Sure. So everybody was throwing out ideas. Somebody had the idea of doing the actual death as a countdown would be, because there were 4 Superman books at the time, and it would be four panels to the page, and then 3, and then 2, and then an all splash page issue in which they emphasize. Yeah. I expect that was Mike Carlin's idea because it's the sort of thing he thinks of, but I don't know for sure if that's true. So we worked out that part of the story. And that was the death of Superman. And
how about creating Steel? And then because such an, I mean, of the 4, if I may, real fast, of the 4, you had the clone, so you had Superboy,
right,
and you had the Kryptonian,
right.
We all assumed was Superman. I mean, I was reading it as it was coming out, and then you had the Cyborg, and then you had this great new character that was inspired by Superman. So tell us about coming up with that.
Okay, well, obviously we weren't going to leave Superman dead because it wasn't our toy. So he's going to come back. So we had a meeting and another meeting next year, and the question was, well, what's going to happen? And I think Carl Kiesel also had the idea. We had been we had been working in lockstep because each issue was a chapter for the longest time.
Absolutely, yes.
And while we desperately loved each other, we were also kind of sick of not doing our own thing. We just kind of wanted to do our own thing for a while. So I had suggested, I think Carl also had suggested, that we separate the books. And I had said, well, if we each create somebody who tries to be Superman, well, then we have control of our own little corner of the universe for a few issues at least. So, it was like, obviously in Man of Steel, for me, for John Henry Irons, the name Steel, I would create a Man of Steel, and Steel, and you've got John Henry Irons, Iron and Steel. It's like, it works, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
John Henry, the steel driving man. So, I mean, he's one of John's favorite characters. He has been one of John's favorite legends for a long time.
Yeah.
So, we said, okay, what about John Henry? What about we do John Henry as, he's the soul of Superman. I mean, the other guys were more physically Superman, but we really felt like he was the soul of Superman. And, a real character. Maybe he wasn't taken as seriously as some of the others as going to be the, Superman being reborn. But, we really felt like we wanted somebody who would really, be the way, the basic good guy, truth, justice, and the American way.
Yeah. You had that great scene of Lois when she meets him, and it's like, oh my God, this guy really does, it seems to be the soul of what, like you said, what Superman was. And that's the great thing is, and you'd never think that you could make a legacy Superman character that way. He would have to be a Kryptonian. He would have to have the powers. And no, it was like everyone forgets the man part of Superman. So that was the beauty of that book. Absolutely. No,
I like it.
Also, I think John did a fabulous design for Steel. That's one of the best designs he ever did.
Yeah,
it was great.
Good. And honestly, I can dream up all sorts of great characters, but what the artist draws is going to make a huge impression. That's going to be probably, that's really important. Really, really, really important.
Absolutely. How about those times, Walt, when you and Louise would work together on one of the X books and stuff, X Factor and the like and stuff? How was it? I mean, wow. I mean, honestly, I would think that's a challenge, having work. And
it was just awful to work with. It was really terrible. I'm surprised we're still married. We've worked where she was my editor when I was penciling Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then we worked as co-writers on a limited series called Meltdown that was in the 1990 or so, I think. That was Havoc and Wolverine. And that was being done as painted continuity by Kent Williams and John J. Muth. And we've worked where she's been the writer and I've been the penciler on X Factor.
Yeah.
And also we did we actually did a little even odder thing, or an odder thing. A few years ago, there was a X-Men #1 Gold or something like that. It was an anniversary issue of the X-Men. And Marvel persuaded Stan to script a short story. And so in the end, when the dust settled, he scripted an X-Factor story, because X-Factor, in the beginning anyway, and the stuff we did, was comprised of the original X-Men characters.
Yep.
From unlike the giant team it kind of became.
Yep.
And so it was the 5 characters he'd helped to create, but he didn't want to plot the story. He was aimed to script it. And so in the end, we put together the old X-Factor team. So Louise wrote it. She plotted it. I penciled it. Bob Wycheck inked it. Stan scripted it. And I don't remember who lettered it, because I don't think John lettered that stuff, John Workman. I don't think he lettered X-Factor. I can't remember.
Okay.
And I don't remember who colored it. But we ended up, so there she was the plotter for a story I drew. It's like 5 pages long. It was short. But I have to say, I thought Stan, and she said it in continuity between 2 early issues of the X-Men. I couldn't tell you which issues they were. 7 and 8, something like that. And so it fit in there. So they had the old Danger Room scene, and they had Scott pining for Jean and Jean pining for Scott and not daring to say anything because they didn't want to, screw it up. And Stan really caught it. He wrote it like he was writing it back in 1962 or 63 or 64, whatever it was. And that was great. So by the time we've worked together, it's worked really well every time. Well, I'll give you one quick example, which is in Meltdown, where we both were writing it. We got the plots. We were doing it Marvel style. So we plotted it, and then Ken and Jay would do the paintings, and we get the artwork back and write from that. But during the plotting stage, it was kind of elaborate. And we used the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl as part of the base for that story. And one of us would write, and you would write, and you'd write, and you'd write, and finally, I'm exhausted. And you'd get up, and the other person would sit down at the computer, and they just pick up right where you were and start writing. And it was really, I hate to use the word seamless. It's so overused these days, but I will anyway, because I couldn't go back now and tell you which part of that story was Wheezy and which part of that story was mine. I have no idea. Generally, Wheezy is better at characterization than I am, and I'm better at snappy patter. But that's a bit of a generalization. But it's worked very well. We had a great time working together, and I will tell you, I won't give you the whole story. It's too long and boring. But she wrote some Silver Surfers years ago.
Okay.
And it was a time when Marvel was contracting. And she ran into a whole series of problems editorially, where Marvel kept saying, this is going to be 12 issues, but now we want to just do it as 6. And maybe we'll do 12 later. No, we just want to do it as 3. No, and so it was because they thought, sales will be dropping. We're trying to figure out where the sales would become negative for profit. And they kept cutting it down and down and down. So it was difficult to write. She had a fabulous idea. And 6 of the issues did get done. But the other 6 never got done. And I don't know now. I think something similar has been done in the Marvel continuity somewhere, so it might not be worth doing. I would have given my eye teeth to have drawn that, the whole story, right, but the second half of the story. I would love to have done that, because I thought the idea was so cool. But as I said, now I think that's something like it's kind of been done somewhere at Marvel, so it wouldn't have the same effect. But at the time, it was really riveting. It was for a very quiet person who just works up in her office and doesn't say very much. She's very revolutionary in her approach to some stuff. And that was just awesome.
Okay, there you go. That's part 1 of my conversation with Louise and Walter Simonson. Part 2 coming tomorrow. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation. We got more for you to come. And it's been great having everybody on in June. And I'm making plans for July after the 4th. The 4th of July being midweek and everything always kind of makes things hinky leading up to it. And even, I have a bad feeling it's going to be a 5-day weekend rather than just a 4-day weekend normally for holidays. So in any case, more great stuff from Word Balloon coming this week and next. And I can tell you right now, something we got set up for July 5th. Joe Casey coming back to Word Balloon to talk about his brand new book, which is a sequel to Butcher Baker. And we'll get more into that when we talk to Joe next week. Until our next episode, which is part 2 of Louise and Walter, thanks for listening to Word Balloon. Until then, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2023.